If I were to summarize Doom Eternal, I would have to say that, for me at least, it's basically the Bohemian Rhapsody of gaming. A wonderful masterpiece that can be regarded as the very best the shooter genre has to offer. Now, I'm not trying to diss the modern shooters by any means. They are great and I play them all. But from time to time, you need a break from all that realistic modern shooter aesthetic and play something old school and hardcore. And it's not like the Field of Duties aren't fast-paced or anything, but they're not exactly masterpieces in their own rights when it comes to the gameplay. Because shooting in modern games basically ends the same way it starts. There's nothing so uniquely dynamic when it comes to the actual shooting scenes that make you think on your feet, nothing that makes you put your controller down and just go,
God, that was so intense!
But in Doom, well, you kinda get this perfect marriage between a rich, smooth symphony of technique and a raving, depraved metal rock singer that snorts cocaine and f***s two bitches at the same time. Doom's enemy encounters are akin to a gory waltz, perfectly in tune with your brain. In other words, it creates a heightened sense of immersion through extremely accelerated gameplay that keeps you fully engaged for the entire duration of the combat sequences. Now, at the point of writing this, Doom Eternal is the best single-player shooter I have ever experienced. When the first Doom came out, I was but 3 years old, so I never got to play it. Also, who the hell had a good PC during the 90s in Eastern Europe anyway? And as I grew up, I knew about the legacy of Doom, how highly regarded it was amongst gamers, but the old Dooms were just too outdated for me when I finally got a decent PC, so I didn't give them another thought. Until Doom 3 came out and it blew me away. Also, it kinda blew my PC away too, cause again, you had to be stinking rich to afford the very best computer to run Doom 3. Alas, I finished it nonetheless. I gotta admit, it scared the crap out of me and I was very impressed by it. Now I know that a lot of purists disregard that game, but I was only 14 at the time, so I didn't care about how it stacked up compared to the originals. Meanwhile, Doom kinda disappeared from the gaming scene, and aside from that 3D remastered version of Doom 3 or whatever it was called, the shooter slowly faded away into history. 12 years later, enter Doom 2016. At first, it didn't do much for me and I didn't know why, so my first playthrough with it was kinda meh. Don't get me wrong, I did appreciate the hell out of the gameplay, the graphics, the optimization, basically everything about it. But something made me not really enjoy it. I kinda had to force myself into finishing it, and it took me about a week to reach the end credits. But that was only my first time with it, because a year later, during one fateful Easter holiday, I tried it again. This time, I finished it in 2 days. Since then, it got its hooks in me and it never let go. That's why I even finished it a third time, and I played Doom VFR twice as well. Now, at first I didn't like it because I never got to experience the original Doom games as a kid and my brain wasn't adjusted for that type of relentless gameplay. I always felt not exhausted by the gameplay, but rather I got fed up with the combat real fast and I didn't want to spend a lot of hours playing it. And at that point, I still didn't know why this was happening. However, years later, after I saw this video from Game Maker's Toolkit, a phenomenal channel by the way, it all made sense.
I never finished Doom. And I love Doom. It's amazing. It's got some of the best shooter combat in years.
More or less, Doom 2016 is divided into two basic parts: combat and exploration. The exploration does contain some traces of platforming, but in this department it doesn't even begin to compare with other titles like Uncharted, for example. And as Mark Brown so eloquently put it, Uncharted has a lot of game design pillars to keep players engaged without reaching fatigue. That's why you have this well-balanced formula made up of cutscenes, combat, puzzles, and platforming. And in my mind, Doom 2016 was basically 90% combat and 10% whatever else. The combat, as we all know, is super fast-paced. You micromanage killing demons, then you have a quick break, then it's more combat, then a short break again, even more combat, and so on. In other words, Doom 2016 is all action, and there is a reason why Uncharted is the way it is. It's because our brains aren't exactly hardwired to take in this type of relentless gameplay for prolonged periods of time. Or at least mine wasn't, and that's why I had to force myself into finishing it the first time. But after those hardcore combat seeds had enough time to take root inside the gamer part of my brain, everything was in the right place, and that's why I loved it my second and third playthrough. Anyway, like millions of other players, I awaited the fateful day till the next Doom was to be released. That day came, but I was too poor to buy it. So after the 2020 Christmas break, I finally got it at a discount, and Jesus Christ on a cross and Holy Mother of God, it's
so f***ing amazing!
I was wondering how they could possibly ramp it up compared to the previous iteration, but the id Software magic worked like a charm. Cause I have never ever played anything else remotely like it. Compared to Doom Eternal, all of the battlefields and the Call of Duties are squirt guns, honestly. It retained much of that 90s DNA with no reload, all action, never stop moving formula, and the resulting feeling I got from the exhilaration of playing it is just indescribable for me. Now, Doom might be a shooter, but at the heart of the gameplay lies strategy actually, or micromanaging like I put it earlier. There are different tiers or hierarchies of demons on the screen at any given time, and there are never just the same ones in an intense battle sequence. The reason for this is that the player will always have variety and never get bored of combat. After a couple of encounters, you will most likely know what it takes to defeat each type of demon, and when you see the cluster of enemies awaiting you, your brain automatically starts devising strategies according to what's happening on screen. Sometimes you might want to take out the big guys first. Other times, you might consider that the best approach to start with is by taking down the cannon fodder instead. Another stroke of genius in Doom's combat is the fact that the in-game resources like ammo, health, and armor are found in enemies instead of chests, with few exceptions of course. But the main mechanic of replenishing your supplies is always one chainsaw or one glory kill away. What else sets Doom apart from all other mainstream shooters are the upgradable, customizable weapons with alternate fire that help you rip and tear everything in your path. I just love the fact that switching between them constantly is more of a precise problem-solving situation than anything else. Cause you know who does what, and depending on the monsters you're facing, you adapt accordingly. There's no point in going into more detail cause you'll know how it is. Now, returning to what I was saying earlier about combat fatigue, I didn't get it in this one because they, quote-unquote, solved the problem with generous platforming sequences. In Eternal, they offer you the necessary breather to mentally chill the f*** out after battling for 5 minutes straight that may as well be 50 at the rate you're having to navigate the map and figure out the situation. And yeah, I'm aware that purists are all like, "You're ruining Doom, man," or whatever. But for me, the platforming sequences are godlike. Also, I giggled a bit when I saw the homage paid to Super Mario Bros. With the fire chains. Here we go! Overall, I'd say I came quite a long way from pushing myself to play the first one throughout an entire week to really admiring and adoring this type of modern old-school hardcore shooter because it's so utterly different from anything else out there. Eternal is part of a legacy that basically spawned every other existing shooter out there. It is the essence of pure gameplay itself taken to the next level, and for some, it is the very definition of gaming. Also, Doomguy or Doomslayer is hella cool. He's like this off-the-rails Batman. I mean, he doesn't talk, he just does what he's supposed to do. He's
the strong, silent type. He wasn't in touch with his feelings, he just did what he had to do.
The beast! Does he not seek enhanced power? Gifts to aid him in his noble conquest, perhaps in return for my...
Doom Guy is perfect as a character for this game because he basically is the embodiment of Doom. And just like Doom, he doesn't care about what you think or feel, he doesn't care about your wants and needs. Doom is unapologetic and it is perfect this way. Okay, so Doom Eternal is amazing and I love Doom Guy, but I do have a pet peeve with the game, and that is the endgame encounter. Now, in its own rights, it's engaging as hell, pun intended again, but isn't it a bit cliche? I mean, the apex of the game, the epitome of boss fights, is this big bad Copra demon that only swings in slow motion. I'm not trying to be a douche here because I am talking about its software, but wouldn't it have been so much cooler if you were to climb aboard one of those giant mechs and battle the demon Kratos versus Ares style? These two big badass titans destroying everything in their path, akin to Neo versus Agent Smith or even King Kong versus Godzilla. They kept showing these giant suits of armor throughout the entire game. I was thinking that it was all leading up for Doom Guy to ride in one a la Power Rangers style. I think it would have been one hell of an ending scene. Anyway, that's it. Doom is best. See ya.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.